So we're talking about the life cycle of a star, and in order to make a star, first of all we need a protostar. So this is a huge cloud of dust and gas in space, and the gravity between the atoms in the cloud pulls all the atoms together. That makes the cloud get smaller. That increases the pressure and temperature of the cloud, and if we can get that temperature and pressure large enough, we'll then have fusion starting to occur. But this only happens if the cloud is big enough. Once fusion has started in the protostar, it then becomes a main sequence star. In a main sequence star, the forces acting on the star are stable. So the two forces involved are gravity, which pulls the star in towards the centre, making it smaller, and then the force from the hot gas pushing outwards, and the gas keeps staying hot because of the energy released by the fusion. So if those forces are balanced, the star will stay the same size and temperature, and it is a main sequence star. In the main sequence star, fusion is occurring in the core, and it fuses hydrogen into helium. Now, depending on how big this main sequence star is, two different things will happen to it next in its life. If the star is about the same size as our sun, it will follow this part of the star life cycle. However, if the star is much bigger than our sun, as over here, it will follow this part of the star life cycle. So let's talk about the life cycle for a star the same size as our sun or smaller first of all. When the hydrogen has run out in the star, so all the hydrogen has been fused into helium and there's no hydrogen left, then changes happen in the star. That is because the type of fusion taking place in the star has changed. So we're now onto a red giant, and as the name would suggest, moving to this stage means that the star size has increased, so the star's got bigger. Okay, the outer surface of the star has got cooler because it's got bigger, and so it's become a red coloured star, which is a bit cooler than it was before. Now, in the red giant, fusion is still taking place, but it's fusion of large elements. So here we're fusing together small atoms to make anything up to oxygen in the periodic table. So we're not fusing hydrogen and hydrogen to form helium, we're fusing hydrogen and helium to form lithium, for example, or helium and helium to form bigger elements. So elements up to oxygen are formed by fusion in a red giant until all of the helium has been fused together and there is nothing left for fusion to take place on. When there is no material left in the red giant to fuse, it will change again into a white dwarf. So what happens here is that the core of the red giant, where fusion was taking place, is left behind, but no fusion takes place anymore, and so it's just white hot, and that is the white dwarf. The outer layers of gas that did exist around the red giant are dispersed into the universe, just leaving the white hot core, which is extremely hot and known as a white dwarf. Eventually, over time, this old core of the star will cool down, and as it cools down, it will eventually become a black dwarf that isn't hot. And so you're just left with the cold, old interior of a star. Again, no fusion is taking place in the white dwarf or the black dwarf. Now let's talk about what happens if the star is much bigger than our sun. So it was a main sequence star where it was fusing hydrogen into helium, and when the hydrogen runs out, it also changes, but this time it's going to change into a red supergiant. As the name suggests, this is even bigger than a red giant, but it's changed for the same reasons. The hydrogen that was in our main sequence star has run out, and so the size of the star changes. We now have fusion of larger elements again, but this time up to iron. So anything in the periodic table up to iron can be made inside a red supergiant by fusion. Again, the outer surface of the red supergiant is cooler because the star has increased in size, which has meant that it's changed colour to be red. Now, eventually, all of the helium will run out in the red supergiant for fusion, and at that point, the star will change again into a supernova. Now, a supernova is a massive explosion. It's very bright. You can see it all across the universe, and it releases a huge amount of energy. What's taking place when a supernova occurs is that the outer layers of the star collapse, and then they bounce off the core of the star and then rebound outwards as an explosion. So the elements that were fusing inside the core of the star are dispersed by the supernova so that they can go and form into other things like planets. Any element bigger than iron will be made in a supernova because it needs lots of energy for that fusion to occur. So there is some fusion taking place in a supernova, but it's only of elements bigger than iron because they need that extra energy. Now, depending on how big the star was, after the supernova, it can either turn into a neutron star, if it was a bit smaller, or a black hole if it was even bigger. And these are both quite interesting things. A neutron star is extremely dense, and what's happened is that the atom inside the star has collapsed, so the electron and the proton have turned into a neutron, so there's no space inside the atom anymore, so it's this ridiculously dense neutron star. If it's a black hole, because it's even bigger, there's even more gravity, and it gets so dense that even light can't escape it, and it then becomes a singularity known as a black hole. So there you have it, the star life cycle of a star, of a big star and a smaller star. You need to be able to label the different stages and describe what's happening for different questions. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the different exam style questions you could have, and you're going to have a go at answering them.